Hello.
My old friend.
Hey, buddy. What you up to?
From what I understand, you driving down the road right now.
Yes, sir. I mean, it's a pretty day on the highway. Was thinking about giving you a call, man. What have you heard about Delphi lately? What can you tell me? You know, we cover that quite a bit, and I hadn't been keeping up with it. Have you heard any good updates or anything we should follow up with?
Well, maybe. Let's talk about it for a minute because this has been going on now. We've been covering this case, well, on this podcast for 6 months now. And, we've talked about this Keegan Klein business. And so here lately, if you pay attention to the Murder Sheet podcast, Murder Sheet? What is it? MS? Murder Sheet. It's probably Murder Sheet.
Murder Sheet's a thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, well, that's okay. Yeah. So they've been talking about the fact that Keegan, I call him Keegan. I don't give a fuck what his name is. I'm gonna call him what I want to call him. He's he's a little bitch in my world. But anyway, so he was supposed to have a court appearance in September, but they're trying to delay it. And I don't think there's any reason why they shouldn't, because the guy's been already in jail, But again, I always go back to this case because this drives me fucking crazy. I cannot stand the fact that this guy's not been fucking caught. It's getting close to 6 years now,
Yeah, oh yeah, it's a terrible thing.
I mean, 6 years. Again, we've had Uvalde, we've had all these school shootings, but we know who fucking did those things. They're in jail. They're getting ass raped every fucking night, but we don't know who did Delphi. And hopefully he's in jail and getting ass raped every night, but maybe he's not. And that's why we want to keep attention, the fog light on there. We want to keep that out there. So this guy, bridge guy, whoever the hell he is one day caught, and I want to watch the Forensic Files version of this thing, because this guy, and we don't even know about this murder. The cause of death has never been released.
Right. Yeah. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, you go ahead. I mean, it's
all I was going to say, was like, with like the Keegan thing, of course the lawyers and stuff, they're going to try to put it off. Because, I mean, we do try to keep, the spotlight on this case a little bit. It just hadn't been a lot of developments. But, the lawyers, so they're going to try to delay it. I would prefer them go ahead and get him in there and bring out some of that evidence that may shine some light on it, because, well, now depending, you'd have to tell me, why did they delay the case? Was it because of the lawyers or because of just the system? Do you know?
Well, I mean, they say it's because of the fact that, they working on their defense. But you and I both know, if you've ever been in any kind of a court case, I had a DWI back in 2007. And, of course, whenever I did that, I had to go through and meet the lawyers and pay lots of money. And, of course, he is a public defender, but it's not the same thing. But they tried to delay because that's just the way it goes. They meet each other in the halls like, hey, man, I want to delay for a couple months. I've got some stuff working on here. Just don't do it right now.
Right. Well, and the only reason I asked, was because, you're right. When you look at a defense lawyer, I mean, the case is always up in the air. Again, we try to keep a spotlight on it sometimes, and other people do as well. Well, of course, that his name's always brought up. Of course, they're going to be hollering, yeah, we can't get a fair trial. Everybody's showing all the evidence. But conversely, the opposite, the reason I was asking is what if there's some evidence that does tie it together they haven't released? They don't want to release it yet because, for whatever reasons, and it's the system delaying the case, the law enforcement delaying it. And that's why I was wondering if anybody, maybe you had read it or if you'd heard it somewhere else. I was thinking, maybe there is something to that. Go ahead.
There are some theories with it, Of course, like they say, if you go to Murder Sheet, whatever, discussion group, they'll say, well, a lot of people say, well, it's because of the fact they're trying to, they're trying to tie this back together through the the Delphi case, number one. And number two is that they're trying to do it on a certain date, and they're trying to get him to flip on his dad, which is TK, whatever they call him. But, you know, the thing of it is that we don't even know if this is it. I mean, we don't know. Us out here, I don't even know if the police, law enforcement knows who this guy is. But, you know, the last time we talked about the Delphi case on this channel was with our friend Lauren, and we have not heard from her. We love her to death. She's a cool girl. She does some very good things. But, you know, she was pretty honed in on a very specific, the demographic that she described for, you know, well, I can't even say that she would say this is the particular part, but, you know, a lot of people back during a month or two ago were all saying that it was all tied up with family and all this kind of business. But I just don't believe that. Every time I look at it, you know, if this person would have been family on the bridge, they would have said something about it on that audio. And maybe they did, but the police would already know it. And they're just looking for, I don't know what they'd be looking for. If they said on audio, hey, that's Uncle Bob, then Uncle Bob's ass would be in fucking jail right now getting beat the fuck out of every single night. So I don't know that I believe there's any kind of family involvement with this case. But I just still, to this day, I cannot believe that we don't have this case solved after 5.5. It's almost 6 years, dude. They have a video of this fucking guy. They have audio of this fucking guy. They have pictures of this fucking guy. They have sketches of this fucking guy. Why? I don't understand why this case. I mean, I could understand if it were a Bradley Allen type case where he disappeared in the middle of the night, nobody knew what the fuck went on. But this is a case where Libby, German, whatever her name was, she had a video of the guy, and we don't have who this guy is. Why? I don't get why we don't have this case solved yet. You know, I know.
Yeah. Well,
let me say this other thing. You know, they had the FBI there. They had the Marshal Service, supposedly. They had Carroll County. They had Delphi, you know, town, the city of Delphi police, the state, county, marshals, FBI, whoever else there, 23 agencies, whatever it was. They're all sitting there, and they can't figure out this case. I mean, it just baffles me. I don't understand why we don't have it. Why is this case not solved? What do you think?
Well, I mean, you know, devil's advocate. I mean, they may know who it is and just can't prove it. I mean, you know, there may be some evidence that's just not admissible with the systems. You know, I mean, I'm with you. I can't understand why it's not brought to a resolution. We don't know if it's solved or not, and they can't prove it, or maybe there's just been, you know, a mess up in some kind of evidence, enough people trying to cover things that maybe they had nothing to do with the murder. I mean, we're talking about the Ron guy, you know, about him lying to go somewhere. Then there's debate, oh, he did it, da-da-da. Well, that's the man that's dead. We don't know for sure if he had anything to do with it, but he muddled the case. But he could have had something to do with it, you know. So yeah, I'm just kind of wondering if there's been enough muddling of the waters, the tiny lies, the thinking I need to cover somebody, that it's just kind of lost until they get a lucky little break. You know, now that's just what I think.
Well, yeah. Obviously they don't have DNA. Obviously.
Yeah, they made a comment about having DNA, but then there was the comment in quotes, "It's not what you think." You know, now I'm not for sure. What am I supposed to be thinking? I mean, was I supposed to be thinking semen? Was I supposed to be thinking skin, hair? I mean, what was I supposed to be thinking? You know, but if you had DNA,
if you had DNA, Ron Logan, and he was there, his ass would be caught. If you had DNA and Kagan Klein was there, his ass would be caught. I mean, they wouldn't be I'm delaying a case. They would be inside of a jail with 28 motherfuckers beating his head in. I mean, why?
True.
They obviously don't have no DNA, not that you can use. Maybe it's mitochondrial DNA, you know. I don't know.
It might. It might not have been. Yeah, it might not have been for like the DNA type match. It may have been like where they could say, well, we could tell this was a guy, and that's really all they could tell. Something of that nature. So you're right. I mean, I'm not a DNA guy, but yeah, they obviously claim they had something. Maybe that was to scare somebody into making a mistake, or maybe like you say, they have a little bit, but it's not definitive. There's lots of real reasons.
I took DNA from my children. I took samples from my children, and I sent it to a company, and they said within 1.3 trillion %, this is your child. Okay, I understand that. There's it's very unlikely that any other man would have produced that child because it matches your DNA profile. But
yeah,
what the fuck are they doing with this? I mean, how could it not be? I mean, how could you get like a partial DNA imprint? Maybe, I don't know. But I don't even know what that would mean. I mean, I've heard of it a long time ago before the what's it called? The DNA, whatever it is. I mean, I've heard there not being enough DNA to make a full sample, where they had to go to mitochondrial DNA, where they had to look and say, well, they had the same mother within the same generational thing or whatever. I don't understand. I just don't get it, dude. I don't understand how come they ain't caught this motherfucker yet. I don't get it. I can't understand why, if it was as brutal of a murder as they say it was, and it left blood on the ground, everywhere like that, and it left blood on any kind of clothing, which it would have if it was a brutal murder, if it were Ron Logan, they would have found it there. They would have found it on his side-by-side, his four-wheeler, his truck, because he was moving around that day a lot, his jackets, his clothing. I don't get this case. This thing is so fucking crazy to me. I've been trying to contemplate this thing for over 5 years now, and I just don't get it. I don't get why in small town Americano we don't have an answer to this shit. I'm trying to figure it out. I talked to all the police people I know. They're like going, we'd have this shit locked down in just a couple of days, man. I don't understand why it's not. Help me understand.
I don't think I'm able to, man. And there's not enough information to correctly deduce your answer. I think you're going to get used to not understanding for a little while longer.
Donald's like, hey, dude, don't put this shit off on me, man.
Yeah.
All right.
So what else you been doing, man? You were talking about you mowed the yard and stuff. We had a couple conversations about cars and stuff. What else we going to talk about today?
Well, I mean, we always want to talk about Delphi, but there's other things to talk about. Yes, you're right. Today was in my life. I'm not passed away. I'm not murdered today, obviously.
Yeah.
But, so in my world, I rode around out there on a lawnmower for a while, my little zero-turn lawnmower, and my bad boy. And
having you some man therapy. Man therapy. You get on a lawnmower and just mindlessly mow. Man therapy.
Well, it's a therapist. Your lawnmower is a therapist. Yeah. If your lawnmower is not a therapist, you're a dumbass. That's all I can say.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, man, you get out there, you just kind of lose yourself and just throw in some earbuds and go. Have a good time and just be comfortable. Therapy.
listen to some 80 music. Man, I've listened. I had the Def Leppard album. I can't think of the name. It had Pour Some Sugar on Me. That was back in our day. I was listening to the deluxe album. It had like the live versions of it, and it had like the studio versions of it and the demos. And I was listening to that. But of course, my mind reverberated back and forth today, and I was like, I'm going to talk to Donald about this Delphi thing. So we're going to tie in Delphi and everything. But yeah, in my world, I was out there today riding around the lawnmower. I may have had some a little bit of organic plant material.
Okay, yeah. I got you. So you sampled that really good upper end tequila that we were discussing not long ago. Fortuzia. I can't pronounce it, but it's a very good, high quality, probably third tier tequila. Ain't that what we were discussing that time?
I wouldn't call it third tier. I'd call it like, it's like, shit, that may be middle, maybe upper middle. That was some good shit, man. Because
Yeah, well, that's what
well, it's good. Of course, now I'm used to drinking 1800 tequila. That's my favorite. But because that's the one I've had the most, it's rested in the barrel, Respado. I have never had the Anejo. I'm gonna get one of those one of these days. But yeah, of course, as a 50-something-year-old man, I'm like going, damn, I enjoy a good drink. I enjoy my therapist. I enjoy some 80s music. I enjoy riding around, Of course, we're titling this thing something about Delphi. And of course, there's a lot of people that title shit Delphi, and they'll talk for 55 minutes before they ever get to the point. But we didn't. We'll talk about, hey, my vagina itches. I'm like, what does your vagina itching have to do with Delphi? But riding a lawnmower in my backyard and drinking some tequila has a lot to do with it, because of the fact that I don't understand. I don't understand how come we can't have this case solved, no matter how many circles I drive in that 5-acre field back there. I still can't get the Delphi thing solved. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I guess with the family and everything and all the rigmarole going, I don't know if it ever actually be solved. I would love to. You riding around in your circles and doing your therapy, and you roll it over your head. You try to examine it for multiple things, because everybody wants to find a new little angle, and it's great, So I just wish that we could get to the point where the family could have some resolution, that people could quit starting. Oh, they did it. Hey, if they did do it, well, hopefully they will be caught. If they didn't do it, then give them some rest. Who knows? But at some point, there'll be a break in it. Hey, you've been on it so long, you've studied a lot of it, and like you talking about, our friend Lauren, y'all have had several deep discussions. Y'all went into the conspiracy angle 2 or 3 times, which is always good listens, because some of those wilder things, like we've discussed, with some events going on in my life, they almost read like penthouse letters. It's like, I don't know if I can believe this crap or not. And, but it's interesting, and some things that can be wild and conspiratorial can turn out to be true. Just like I was just saying, I would never in a million years believe the shit going on in my life right now if I ain't living it.
Well, you and I both have always heard that sometimes reality is stranger than fiction.
Yes.
That's for sure. So I don't know. So you bring up a good point there, because that's almost a separate show, but not. I'm not going to touch on that too deep right now. But I would like to hear about that right now, because your life, and like my life, and their life, and everybody's life, has been this strange roller coaster all these years. I think that if you've been alive the past 5 years, your life has been a roller coaster, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. Because some of the other cats talk about, I'm driving today, open road and stuff, but I can't be comfortable driving anymore, because I feel like I have to watch out for those crazy people. You see so many more inches of the road rage and the people just aggressive driving, and so times have changed. Everybody, feels like, they've been shut up. So things are just kind of difficult for everybody, and so, hey, a little bit of road courtesy and a little slow down, man. He cut me off. Well, just dumbass and drive on, man. Don't slam on the brakes and get out and have a fight. But you're right. Everybody's got a little roller coaster shit going on these days. And our version of crazy ain't always the same, So,
well, speaking of, how's the road out there today? Have you seen a lot of crazy shit, or has it just been kind of cool, or what's going on?
Well, it's kind of a Sunday today, thankfully. There's a lot more traffic. I came up Friday, and man, the roads were just empty. Kind of weird.
That's what I was Friday. I went to a job fair Friday, and I told the people there, I was like, this is going to be a horrible job fair, because there's nobody on the road today, but everybody showed up. So, but now, so the gas prices are down, and you're out there traveling. It's a Sunday, But now, so there's not much traffic today, or what?
Well, no, that's what I mean. Is I'm surprised. I mean, this is what I'm used to seeing on a Sunday interstate drive. You know, there's enough vehicles that but ain't none of them going kind of crazy yet. You know, there's a couple of them are trying to stick into the wrong spots. But not like usual. So I don't know. I just noticed, hey, the traveling I've done this weekend through the week has been bare, and this weekend is that. I don't think there's as much stupid, but there's a lot more traffic. And maybe it's because of those gas prices falling. Hey, that's a good thing that we're seeing, going on, regardless of who caused it or why. It's falling down. Big job market increase, largest job increase. Hey, that's great. Means people are going to work. So I think we can slowly, if we don't let the politicians and the people trying to tear America down, I mean, we can kind of pull out our deep spots and stuff we're going through and maybe get back to something closer to what we're used to. But too many folks want that too many people want that 1950s thing, but they're not seeing all the bad. Right, they're not seeing all the bad shit that went along with it. It's comfort. They're scared of change. They want the classic. Mama's dressed to the nines, got supper on the table every night. Daddy sits with his pipe. Yes, dear, fix me another plate. They want that shit for some reason. I don't know why.
So,
I understand they consider it a simpler time. There was two sexes. There was a man and a woman. They had their place in society. The children was, gee, jolly Wally, and those people that are in power, they want that shit back because that was the height of their power. And so they do want it back. And so, I think that's why we're seeing a lot of, even though, like with abortion stuff, those highly conservative people that have been put on the Supreme Court ruled against it. But in Kansas, the perfect place for a bipartisan, no, you people have screwed up. We're not that conservative. And they said, no, you're going to leave the abortion laws alone. And I think they're going to be surprised with that. Just my opinion.
Here's my deal. Like you mentioned the 50s, but in the 60s and the 70s, every hippie and cowboy I know fought against this right-wing authoritarian bullshit. But these same motherfuckers now, these same boomers that were, they came up in the best time of the country ever. They all got free college. They all, they had a great fucking life. All these boomers, they all had a great life. They made lots of money. They control all the wealth right now. Generation X, our generation, we didn't do shit because of the fact that these boomers, to me, are the worst things that ever happened to America because they had it too easy. They never had to do anything. These people are a different fucking breed, and these same hippies and cowboys, boomers now, are fighting against the shit they were fighting against. They were fighting for, let me say this, they're fighting for the same shit they were fighting against back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And then in the 90s, everybody got fat and happy. And now, 2000s, 2010s, they're in their 70s. They're like, well, oh, no, goddamn, we're going to have us Donald Trump and a right-wing authoritarianism and Jesus rules. And none of these people are religious. I don't understand how we went from the 1970s to where we're at now. The same people. How did that happen? If you want to talk about some shit I don't understand the Delphi Murders, but I sure as fuck don't understand how we went from the 1970s, disco party and everybody having a good time and respecting each other to the shit we're in now. I mean, how does that happen?
Well,
I'll tell you what.
I'll tell you what I think. We all kind of know the thing of the if you're a if you was a teenager back during our times, in the 50s, going back to, oh, gee, golly, Wally, the pure, clean parents of that time, the boomers, they had the kids and they did that. Well, all right, so the kids in the 60s and 70s were the gee, golly, Wally ones that broke out of the mold and decided they wanted to rebel. Oh, hey, things are growing. I can be my own person. And then they got older and they'd grown out of it and realized, well, even though my parents wasn't perfect, those times were pretty good, even though I fought against it. So a lot of those realized that, well, I was just being a rebel. I didn't actually believe in those causes, because now they're in the position of, well, I'm kind of holding the power and I want to have it for a little bit. You got a little bit of that, I think. Some of the old school ones still fight for it. You still got a few ACLU type people that still believe the ACLU, what it should have been, not what it is now. I mean, the ACLU now is a joke. I mean, you go see what it's both sides of the street. It's, again, you've got too much of, I want my freedoms, but I want to control yours. So I want freedom. Now, wait a minute, that's not freedom. Somebody, I wish I could remember exactly who said this, was, if you say you believe in freedom, but you're impeding the freedoms of others, then you probably don't really believe in freedom. I don't get that, but we've got this way because
it's called narcissism.
Yeah, but we've got this way because people have. It's still too much of that. Oh, you did this to me, I'm going to do this to you. I mean, California and Florida, they're constantly writing the extreme laws opposite to each other. I mean, why are you doing this? It don't make sense. But I don't pretend to make sense. Go ahead, sorry.
But now we've been dealing with, the polarities forever. Male, female. Of course, people have muddled it up some now. But, I mean, I've always heard you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. You poke somebody in the butt, you give them a reach around. I mean, what the fuck's going on with this shit? It's all narcissism to me. It's all about me. Everybody out here talking about, like, from the boomers, from everything else, it's all about, it's all about me. I mean, we're talking about the 80s being all about me, but, I mean, right now, people are so narcissistic, they're not worried about anybody else, man. You're not worried about your cat, your dog, your humans, your people. You're worried about you. I mean, is that what it is? Am I wrong with that? I mean, how far off am I with this narcissism thing?
No. I mean, I think we as a society have become way more narcissistic than we used to. The folks that would not normally, again, it's I've been bound up, the COVID shit. I mean, that's something that we've never experienced in our lifetimes, in any of our lifetimes, that kind of a shut-in, restriction of freedom movement type shit. And, and so I think everybody has gotten a little narcissistic in terms of I've been shut up, I can get out now, I deserve to be able to do these things and go a little crazy. Well, everybody is at the same time thinking they deserve that. And so, they're not paying as much attention to somebody else's situations, feelings, what they may have went through in the pandemic. Some of these people, they may have lost their whole families, and some people never was touched. It is a self-interest thing. Well, that's the whole thing.
You've got to give a
You're not going to get it.
You can't just fucking plow ass and not give a reach around. I mean, what the fuck?
Well, I don't plow ass and do a reach around, but you're welcome to it. The thing with that is
yes, you do. Your woman is very satisfied because you do.
I know.
There's a lot of people now that are narcissists. They don't do a reach around. They're getting their satisfaction. They're murdering. They're doing whatever the fuck they're doing. 2017 on, I've seen this shit. Why the fuck are we? Did something change? I mean, what changed? Is there some kind of a weird 2012 movement? Is there some kind of a ghosty thing? Is it just because we're just spoiled fucking brats? I mean, what has changed to make people so self-centered?
Just self-interest. I mean, again, a lot of folks there's too much anonymity. You can say mean shit because you're on the backside of a screen. And that eventually translates to public, I just think it's tons of combinations of events. People have, some have gotten way more pessimistic. Hey, you can give a reach around if you want to, but there's so many more of them that I'm going to get mine. We started at the same time. You had just as much time to get off as I did. There's
Okay.
lots of that.
Let's drop back exactly 40 years, because like 30 years ago, we were getting out of school or whatever, college, whatever. You go back to 1982 though. That's 40 years ago, and you have the computer coming up. You had the Apple computers, and you had Bill Gates, Microsoft computers, and everybody can judge about how those came about. If you know the history of it, you can say, well, they're both fucking crooks or they're both geniuses. What do you want to say about it? So like 82, 85, computers come along, 87, 90, 92, 95, on up. And it gets to a point to where we're all online now in 2002, 2022, 2012. I missed one, 2012. But now, so what kind of a part do you think this? You mentioned it. That's why I'm bringing it up about this online life. You're hiding behind a computer, and you're not out there in public anymore. What do you think that? Just you, like we talked about this Delphi case. Some people say they're catfishing from an online account. I mean, and that's big in this Delphi case. But in the larger view, is that what people are doing? Are they just these pieces of shit that hide online and they don't tell their real name, and is anonymity? Is that what it is? I mean, is it the ability to communicate on a wider level? I mean, help me grasp. This is a big topic. I mean, what do you see with it? I mean, am I going the right direction with that? Is it having to do with computers? Am I being a Luddite? I'm very advanced with computer stuff. I love computers. I love iPhones. I love Androids. I love all this stuff. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I don't think it's just computers. I mean, I just think it's some of the technology, in general. Again, when you go back to like what you was talking about, we were raised in an age of we had the old, the analog 3-channel TVs and this and that, and then computers and plasma TVs, flat screens. I mean, there's been this huge advancement. Well, we were in that Gen X there, it's a very small little slice of time there to adjust old thinking and learn new ways in the middle of the changes to keep up. A lot of them today, that the millennials and this and that, it was just given to them. I mean, they just intuitively know how to use it because, well, it's there from birth, And, we hear it 1,000 times, like, he knows how to do stuff. He ain't but 8 years old. He can make that phone dance. I can't make it do nothing. I mean, well, it's because they were raised with this technology. But I think being exposed to the wider world at a younger age, it exposes kids to some ideas when they're really not quite old enough to get it, So I think technology has hurt us in some ways, but there is still the society's changing, and it's not going to go back. It doesn't let Pandora's curse out of the box. So
it's never going to change again. But let's just compare for a minute now, because you mentioned we've been talking about the boomers. You and I are both Gen X, and everybody doesn't know about us because we're a small generation. You have the Z generation, which is my children, and you have the millennial generation, which is your children, because you have kids older than me. What is the difference between the Gen X and the boomers, and then how we all differ from the millennials, the Zs, and the Z2s? I mean, how do you see the difference evolving there? I mean, is it a natural thing? I mean, does the country that gets rich and happy and very computer-oriented naturally move to where we're at? Or are we very narcissistic community moving toward a very narcissistic place? I mean, we're all dreaming about simulations and being locked in the computer and saving our souls forever through saving our digital life, or even our brain someday, all that's complicated. But let's just get down to the nuts and bolts of Generation X versus these other generations, because nobody knows about Generation X. We're kind of left out if you really look at it, because we're kind of like the silent generation. We're kind of like the John Lennon, Jim Morrison generation before the boomers came out. We're kind of like them. We're the kind of like, what the fuck are you doing to our country, man? I mean, what do you think about it?
Well, I mean, with the Gen X, I think it's the flexibility that a lot of the Gen X has in terms of everybody keeps talking about, you a bunch of damn Gen Xers because they think we're grumpy. Well, I don't think it's that we're necessarily grumpy. I'm sure there's some, but a lot of it is we have enough of the old. Our parents, for the most part, raised us right, taught us how to exist in society the way society currently is. My parents left me with the freedom of this is the way it is. Here's how you need to live to function in society. But what you do with it is up to you. I mean, I had the freedom to be flexible about it. And I think too many of the old ones, I can't understand a lot of the boomers locked in old ways. Too many of the new ones, they just jump head first into stupidity. And so we get grumpy because, do you not pay any attention to anything? I mean, do you not listen? Go ahead.
Now, let me ask you this question. We talk about generations, but really, if you think about it, the generation that raised me was a different generation than were my parents. And because the generation that raised me, there was two generations that raised me. There was people that were born in the early 1900s, from 1914 to the 1911 to 1932, and then that was the grandparents, and then after that was the parents from 32 to 52. My parents were all born in 50s or 40s, excuse me. So you have you have to think a generation is 20 years, and it usually starts on a 1. So from 1901 to 1921, from 1921 to 1941, from 1941 to 1961, then you get to us, from 1961 to 1981, 2001, that's millennials. 2000, and then after that, for 20 years, you had the millennials, which is like my kids. So all these generations there, for me, I was mostly raised by people from 1901 until 1921. But I was also raised by the silent generation, which is from, it's a weird generation. That's emotion now. But then I was also raised some by the boomers. So you can't forget that we're even the millennials. They're not just raised by Gen X. Most of their parents are boomers, and a lot of them are raised by the people a generation before that. So you're interacting with all these different generations, and it makes me wonder if the generation thing is even as applicable as I thought it was, or if you're just looking at a bigger point in history. I mean, there could be a different way of looking at it than just generations. I mean, the country that we live in has evolved over time. We went from being in civil war in the 1860s to world wars in the the early 1900s up to about 1945, and then you had the 1950s, which was really people that were born in the early 1900s, the 1920s, living, raising kids of a different period. And then the 70s came along. We had all these oil embargoes. And then we had all this fighting in the background for rights by different people from the 60s and 70s back there. Because we just got past this war. There was all these rules. Everybody was working all the time. And we're under restraint. We go through this freedom. And then now we're way past the 1940s. We had the 50s where everybody kind of grew and made money. You had the 60s where everybody fought against the right-wing authoritarians. You had the 70s where everybody just got free as hell. You had the 80s where everybody grew mullets and listened to dance music. You had the 90s where everybody was depressed and listened to Kurt Cobain. You had the 2000s where we had 9/11, and everybody's life has totally fucking changed forever. You're all being monitored all the time. you had the 2010s where we had, I don't even remember the 2010s, but 2010 to 2020 was a blur. That was a crazy time. Help me understand that time period. If nothing else, what happened from 2010 to 2019 that made us have this conversation we're having today?
Oh, exactly what you said. I mean, generations, we're labeling things, and I think it's not really the right terms. I mean, when I say a generation, I don't mean offspring of the previous one. I'm actually talking about changes in society that create a change in a generation to label each one of these generations. So the 1900s, like you were talking about with your grandparents and stuff, they were raised, during a time of, especially where we live, I'm not saying this is everybody, just us, dirt farmers, basically. I mean, you got by with what you had. It was hard life, Well, then the industrial age came around. You had big change, tractors and All right, well, so that generation has a different set of values than the next one that, grew up using a tractor versus a horse. I mean, each one of these, there's a change, and so that generation acts a certain way. Now, you fast forward to the 50s. Well, that's the future of the kitchen. I mean, technology was kicking off. Everybody had dreams of flying cars, and it was that industrial thing. So they learned to act certain ways and do certain things. Then the war came around. Fight. There was all the all kinds of crap going on. The war ended. People were sick of fighting. They wanted peace and love. So then you had the hippies come in. People wanted, man, don't suppress me. I just want to have a good time. I'm tired of being scared all the time, or whatever it was. And then the next one comes around, and they're a little different. But each time there's a big change, I think we have what we call generational change. Ours was the little bit of the old, the time of the 70s, where people were still a little bit about the freedoms and, tired of the wars and shit. And then you've got the ones where the new ones, they had it to begin with. The sad thing I find about the next one that I don't like as much is how many of our kids of our generation are letting their children be raised by their, by either by us or by another grandparent. I don't like that very much. I think there's going to be a generational mess up there, and it could be some of what we're seeing here in that 2010 to 2019 you're talking about. Lots of those children, we call millennials, weren't raised by Gen Z. They were raised by either Gen X or even boomers.
Okay.
But they had all the advantages of that, all this advanced exposure to new ideas really fast by boomers who did not understand what we understood.
And boomers, let's talk about this in the terms of Delphi now. Because you got to look at who was raising these girls. They were boomers. And boomers, I was raised by boomers some, but my grandparents that were born in the first generation of the 1900s, from 1901 to 1921, they didn't like the way the boomers were living. They disliked it, just like a lot of the the Generation X doesn't like the way Generation Z is doing it. So it's the same kind of thing. But now
it is.
So now all that rolls through, and we talk about 2010, 2010, 2010 to 2019. This is when Delphi occurred. These children were being raised by boomers who were already tired. They've been working, making money their whole life. In fact, I've heard people say that, that generation has money. That at that time there, both, my parents were retired by then. They owned multiple homes or maybe RVs and shit. And they're not uncommon. A lot of them do. Or they want to, very soon. Now, these here may have been a little bit younger than what mine were. But at the same time, you're having everybody wanting to do that. These people raising these children that they may not have normally raised, but I think that you can look back and you'll see that the early 1900s people raised Generation X. I think it's about 2 generations back that actually raise the children, except for the kids that do really well. Now, the kids that do really well have the parents raising them. But I'm gonna go to a larger point here. At the same time, you had all of that going on. The boomers, like they were very liberal with their children. My grandparents were harder on me and let me go places than my parents. My parents were like, yeah, you know, you want to go to the movies or walk-in theater and you want to ride your bike there 12 miles away? Sure, fucking go ahead. I don't give a shit. You gonna be have some friends with you? You know, fucking do it, man. And we did it.
Yeah.
And we expected to have freedom. I did what the fuck I wanted to do. As a teenager, I had a vehicle at 14. I did what the fuck I wanted to do when the fuck I wanted to do it. Okay? And my boomer parents let me get away with it, and the generation before that paid for it. The 1921 and 1941 paid for it because I worked for them. You know, and they gave me extra money that was part of my family. So you had all that going on. At the same time, if you look back in the background of all what's going on, you have a growing population. You have a crime rate that's growing. It actually started decreasing sometimes around the early 1960s. The first time ever it decreased, up until, you know, just recently. So you had where our people were living until about 2017, the crime rate really went up. But so like during that period of time when the boomers were living, and as we were growing up and growing out, you had the crime rate going up. And you have people that have freedom living by the boomer grandparents, and you have the crime rate going up. And you have little girls doing shit that people did back in the 1950s. And you started having a lot of murders again in 2017. If you go look at the crime stats for 2017, it was the first time it really spiked in a long time. Crime rate had been going down for a long time. Now, a lot of people said it was the president. A lot of people said it was the Congress and all that kind of shit. And, of course, you know, it's kind of like a lot of things. It just kind of occurs naturally. Some things help it along. Some things don't. There's a lot of interesting things if you look at the stats. But, so back to Delphi here and the crime and what you saw in the 80s going on. And if I ever met somebody in the 80s and they said they had a felony, that something was pretty hardcore. But like you had the 90s, you had a lot of people getting on drugs. You had the early 2000s, we invaded Afghanistan and got lots of opioids. That was 2002, 2003. And then by 17, we have everybody addicted to opioids, and we have Delphi. We have the boomers raising their kids that are out there getting killed. We have Generation X and Millennials. They're all on drugs, fucked up somewhere in rehab or hospitals or dead. I mean, is that why we had this murder? I mean, why do you have people, children, being able to go out and do stuff like these girls are doing in a relative time of peace and are getting killed? I mean, why does that happen? Is that some sick narcissist out there, or is that just some psychopath?
Well, it kind of depends. I mean, in the case of your point of the previous generations treating each one depending on what you learn from them or how you interact with them. You know, with the older parents doing it, they may have, they don't understand, hey, they know it's bad out there, and they may or may not want to let the kids go, but because they're of the generation closer to, you got to pretty much go do what you wanted to when you wanted to. They let them do it and just say, well, be careful because everybody's doing it. But you've got that back to, there's just some folks that are just not right in the head. They may have been exposed to shit at the wrong time, got on drugs, just fucked up, or they could just be sick. And when I say sick, I don't mean like they go take a pill. Just sick sons of bitches. Enjoy whatever they're doing to cause pain. I think you see a lot more of it these days because it's so much easier for the sicko people to express their sickness. The anonymity behind the screen, to be able to lure girls or boys, men, women, whatever your poison is, it's easier to do it, and I think it lets people again, let go easier. You know, where normally, you know, everybody has a dark thought from time to time. I mean, you know, if there's ever a kid that will ever one time actually mean whenever, you know, you got your ass whooped, you ain't laying in there crying, wishing your parents was dead, they're lying. I mean, you did that shit, but you didn't actually do it, you know. But I think the way some of these changes we've had and some of the unprecedented just outright non-American behavior we're seeing in the media, politics, the authoritarianism, you know, the extreme liberalism, the wokeism. Hey, that wokeism's just as shitty as the extreme authoritarianism. It's extreme sides. And it just, people just more likely to go, you know what, I'm just going to indulge my sickness. And they just follow a dark thought. I don't know why they do it, but I think it's easier to do it these days.
Okay, so let's explore this. We are both, you know, we've been around a bunch of crazy fucks. We've been alive for a long time. So let's just talk about, you know, what age and what type of person we think would go onto a bridge on the day before Valentine's Day in 2017 and kill 2 little girls. I mean, what the fuck would make someone do that? I mean, what if you had to, you know, given all we've talked about what's occurred for the past 100 years, 120 years in our society with some criminality thrown into it. You know, there's always been sick fucks forever. We all know that. But why would a person in 2017 on Valentine's fucking Day kill 2 little girls and not get fucking caught almost 6 years later? I mean, help me understand.
I don't know. You know, I can't. My brain don't work like that. You know, I can profile like we discussed. Like, well, you know, you look at the pictures, you look at the evidence. We call it profile. What? Oh, 27 to 37. That's what I think. Okay. Maybe a little older, maybe closer to 40.
I agree with that. I believe I can't think it could be. I've heard people say it was real young, but I can't see that unless they're just a really psychopath motherfucker. You have to be a fucked up individual to be under 40 and do something like that. You know, under 35.
And going back to the thing of the, you know, why ain't solved yet? Well, again, you know, to support my 27 to 40, probably closer to the 35 to 40. You know, if I'm just guessing. You know, just some of the movements on the bridge, expresses age. You know, there ain't that little awkwardness of a 20 less, you know, something like that. I mean, you see how millennials, kids about that age, or whatever, I say kids, young adults.
That service was determined, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you know, they moved, so that means, you know, maybe he wasn't experienced, but he was at least confident in what he was going to be doing. Now, so, I mean, that tells me the age has got to be a little older. And if they were that young and that psychopathic, they would have already done something else, or they would have got caught. So, again, it advises that there was a little age. He kind of knew how to make it look like different things to maybe throw them off. It might not be solved because he may just be smart enough to, well, I'm going to throw in some satanic ritual shit just because. You know, the thrill was just killing the girls. But muddy the waters, make it satanic-like, do this. I mean, just do crazy shit with it that is contradictory. And, well, again, you're talking age, experience, or confidence, or intelligence. That ain't the hallmarks of a young person.
But now let's at the broader picture. I mean, how do you murder people like that? I mean, how does
my mind? I don't know. My mind don't work like that.
I know you can't explain that, but you know, I understand. Like, I've been mad at people. I'm like going, well, you're a fucking dick. You know, and the next day I'm like, well, maybe I had a part in it. But this son of a bitch here murdered people, and apparently brutally murdered people. He's not turned himself in. He ain't saying shit to nobody. I mean, he doesn't give a fuck. He's probably doing whatever the fuck he's doing today. I thought sometimes I've heard podcasters say, well, you know, he's scared as fuck listening to this. And I'm also saying, he may not be. He may not be. He may be laughing at you. You know, who knows about this fuck? I mean, this if he was, he may have been. So let's just say that. How would you say he was? Probably closer to 40.
I think he's probably closer to 35 to 40, but 27 to 40.
But now, let's look at who he was raised by, who was born by. So let's just say he was 37 in 2017. So that would place him being born in 1980. You think?
About that, yeah, probably. So it's going to end up being boomers and late generation 1950s type people. You're going to have the Vietnam era war people, and you're going to have the 1950s era people. Is about what I think he was raised by.
Yeah. So if he was raised by the people, now he could have even been. Now, see, I was born in '71, and my grandparents died in the '90s, and they were born in the early 1900s. So he could have been raised by some of them too, but he would have been almost 10 years younger than me and you. So he was out there whenever they were really old. He was being raised by them, maybe that older generation, from 1901 to 1921. He could have been raised by them, you know. And
well, he could have, but
they're being so old, they don't even know what the fuck he's doing, you know. And
well,
they don't
and
know how
that's
to
what I mean.
advise him on anything, you know.
Right, and you know, I mean, it's a big jump. That, you know, if he was raised by someone from that time period, you know, it would have been at such a young age. They probably would have not really got anything across to him. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? That's why I was saying it's probably the biggest portion of his raising, because of the age of somebody from the 1901 time period you're talking about, probably would not have lived long enough to actually teach him any advice. You know, I still think, you know, hey, 1950s, you know, the golly gee type people probably would have been the grandparents, and then a Vietnam vet type person, you know, would have been probably their parents. Right. You know. But now, you know, now just conversely now, just.
But now let's talk about this 1 second. The people raising them were probably too sick to even raise them. That's the point I was trying to make. That if their grandparents were raising them, and they were like, you know, in that time period, you throw in the war, and then you throw in a lot of these Z's and millennials, and their parents were over in the war, in the Afghanistan and the Iraq war, and some of those people served up to 4 terms of 1 year. So they started after 4 years over there in Iraq or Afghanistan. A lot of Americans, 100,000 people. They served that much time, the ones that weren't killed, you know. So, but now I think he may have been a little bit before that if he was born in 1980. So he was born.
Right, he would have been. Well, see, that was what I was getting to. Is most likely his parents were somebody that, you know, served in the Vietnam War. Now, this is just what I was trying to get at with. All right, so let's take, for example, let's say, you know, his parent, father, something, you know, was going to war. Well, we know some Vietnam vets that have some problems. You know, they're just PTSD, a little paranoid, you know, type thing. And so now imagine somebody being raised by, you got maybe the parents from the 50s, you know, maybe they did most of the raising and he got a few values. But if you have a crazy Vietnam vet preaching in the ear all day, hey, you might be raised to be a little crazy. You know, we don't know who he was raised by, but those possibilities are there, you know. You know, if they would have been somebody who would have, you know, I guess been more centerline, maybe he would have done it.
Here's something else to throw at you, because I was just thinking about this. I was looking at it like, so you saw people. Now, you know, I'm married to a woman that's about 15 years younger than me, and her parents were born around 1960. So 1960. So around 1980, they would have been having babies. A lot of them having babies, but not a lot of them having babies, because it was the Generation X was one of the smaller generations. But this generation here, around 1959, afterwards, they started having these millennial generations, which is bigger than Generation X, which is comparable to what the boomers were. If you start comparing them to what we've already said, this guy is basically a millennial or a very, very, very late Generation Xer. There's no way that he's not a full Generation Xer. I don't think he was old. I can't believe that guy going across that bridge is 45 years old, which is about how old I was in 2017. I couldn't see that. Maybe he was. A lot of people have accused that guy of being Ron Logan, but I mean, I don't think that's a guy that's that old. I mean, to me, he looks like a millennial. He looks like somebody born between 1979 and 2001 or 1999, somewhere around that 20-year time period. That's where he looks like he is to me. Because then, 1980 to 2017, he's about 37 years old. He's moving across that thing. He's been raised by people that were probably older generations, but this guy, he may have been born from those people born in 1960. And those people, the boomers, are a totally different generation. Life was so great for these guys. Their parents who came back from the war, they had, they were having kids around 30 or so, 26 to 30. They were producing these kids, and their life was great. There was no belief that America was bad whatsoever. There was never a mention that America polluted anything. We didn't realize any of that until the 1970s, early 80s. I mean, the world for those guys that were born between 1955 and 1980, I say 75, for us, really, and maybe after us, not as much us as those that came before us. They could not imagine a world where they could fuck up anything. Their college was free. They didn't have to worry about laws or rules. Cops were very few and far between. America was prosperous. There was money everywhere. Everybody could get a free education. They partied. In the 1970s and 80s, that generation partied. They weren't worried about kids. They were worried about partying. And while they were doing that, older people were raising those kids, and I think they were too old to be raising kids. I don't know. What do you think?
Most likely. I mean, it's hard for a grandparent to raise a grandkid because, hey, they're your grandkids. You don't want to have to be the one raising them and disciplining them and stuff. You want your grandbaby to come to the house and you go, oh, let Pop hold that baby and give them a sucker and then, all right, you're hopped up on sugar. Go back to mama. That's what you want to do. But, yeah, I don't think a grandparent of that time period would be as interested in raising their grandchild as well as they tried to raise their own child. So if that's the case of this, then yeah, I could see it because he probably didn't get all the if the grandparents did it at that age period, he probably didn't get the training and the actual instillment of values that he would have if he'd been their direct son, not their grandson. So I guess is what I'm trying to say. Hey, man, I'm getting into a real congested area. I need to let you go.
Hey, you know what? I appreciate you talking about Delphi Murders. You can go ahead and hang up. I want to finish up this thing, okay?
All right, brother. Talk to you in a little while.
Okay. Goodbye.